Leading a startup team, whether you're delivering a sugar rush, stocking coffee, or getting a regular delivery of snacks, Office Depot has solutions that fit every startup culture, from getting those first business cards and stationery to ordering fleece pullovers with your new logo. To learn how Office Depot and the California Technology Council have partnered to bring you savings on all of these startup essentials and more, go to californiatechnology.org/member benefits. I'm Daniel Levine, and this is the Bio Report. The biotechnology industry continued to post record numbers, attract significant investment, and won approval for a solid number of new drugs in 2015. Nevertheless, EY in its new Beyond Borders report warns that there's a deceleration within the industry that points to threats that could undermine the robust growth the industry has enjoyed. We spoke to Glen Giovannetti, EY Global Biotechnology Leader, about the new report, the need for the industry to innovate pricing models for new drugs, and why, as companies seek to demonstrate the value of a product, they will need to consider the unique perspective of each payer. Glen, thanks for joining us.
Hey, great to be here, Danny.
With Bio 2016, you released the 30th edition of the Beyond Borders report on the industry. Overall, plenty of big numbers and signs of a maturing industry, but also an industry facing real challenges that echo themes in recent years. Looking back, how good a year was 2015?
Well, as you say, there's a lot of big numbers, and in that respect, the numbers don't lie. It was, a very good year with, record revenues, mostly, of course, driven by a couple handful of large companies that we call the commercial leaders, but, nice increases in revenue, nice increases overall in profits from those companies. Looking broader to the whole population of companies, still a fairly strong fundraising year, although, and we should chat about this, things certainly slowed down at the end of 15 and into 16. And, a nice increase in R&D spending. So, if you look at some of those traditional metrics, 15 was a very good year. A little bit of a story of 2 years, right? Looking back, first half very strong, and then, the market certainly pulled back. Some of that was probably due to happen anyway under, sort of normal sector rotation types of challenges. We've had a long, 3-4 year kind of bull run of investor enthusiasm for biotech. But of course, some of the well-documented episodes around, certain pricing controversies, a couple of companies that were in the news, along with the whole presidential election sort of rhetoric around things, certainly sped things up. So, kind of 2 different years, but we certainly didn't leave 15 and aren't here in 16 in any way pessimistic. This wasn't, a bust part of the cycle. The overall story for the industry is still quite strong.
Well, there are not only highs in revenues and income, but a deceleration for both. How much of a theme do you think that will continue to be, and what kind of actions might companies take to counter that?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, that underlies really the key challenge for everybody in the industry, whether you're a biotech commercial leader, a big pharma, or, a company, an earlier stage biotech developing a product. And we've talked about this in the past, right? The pressure on healthcare budgets is high, and it's only going to grow for lots of sort of macro demographic trends, not just because new medicines are coming out that happen to have high price tags. That tends to grab the story, and it's it's truthfully part of the story. But as societies, at least in the developed world, we're getting older, and to a large extent, unfortunately, we're getting sicker in terms of instances of chronic disease and the like. So healthcare budgets, for both of those reasons, are under strain, and they really are going to struggle to to deal with what is a pretty strong pipeline of very innovative medicines coming, which is great, of course. I mean, that's great for us as a society, as patients, et cetera. But that pressure on healthcare budgets is a reality. It's a long-term trend. It'll be with us, and it is going to, in the short term, be a drag or a headwind on growth. And it's going to require different strategies from companies as they either approach commercialization or even those in the market to be, frankly, a little bit more innovative and strategic in their pricing. The industry has experimented with and has several sort of examples of new payment models, be they true performance-based or sometimes they're more volume or managed entry kind of market-based deals. But to a large degree, those have been done more defensively when a payer just couldn't provide the level of access at the price that a particular company was looking for. We really think the longer-term trend is to kind of move beyond the transactional to a strategic relationship that is, frankly, more playing offense and being on the front foot about, what kind of relationship can payers and companies have to adequately reimburse for the risk taken and the value created, but also to really more accurately measure that value. So there's real opportunity there. But yeah, you're right. I mean, in the short term, growth, we'll see a growth headwind in the absence of a Sovaldi type, product introduction that makes the whole industry look great.
You mentioned Sovaldi. When we used to crunch the industry numbers, it got to a point where we wanted to look at the data without Genentech because it had become so dominant and outsized that it skewed the real picture of the industry. Gilead now represents almost 25% of the industry's revenues. To get a real picture of the industry, do we need to remove Gilead?
Well, I think you need to remove all of the commercial leaders, or at least that's the approach we've taken. So my self-interested answer there is because it's something the strategy we've taken is, there's a couple of handfuls. We know the names. Certainly Gilead's at the top of that list, but obviously Amgen and Regeneron and Celgene and Biogen and, now, Shire Baxalta is going to be very large. Those companies that are really true commercial leaders, they have a story, they have their own trends, their own set of immediate challenges. And then, you got to look at everybody else. We arbitrarily make the cutoff $500 million of revenue. You could set the bar somewhere else, but the vast majority of companies below that level are still R&D stage. And we know they have a different set of challenges, around capital access, around strategic transactions, around, advancing their pipeline and dealing with the regulatory environment and whatnot. Now, they can't avoid having a longer term view towards the commercialization challenges and demonstrating value for the products that are in their pipeline, et cetera. They're just at a different stage in their evolution.
We've been through an unprecedented biotech IPO market in recent years. That's slowed, but are we past the point of thinking about biotech IPO windows? Is this an industry that's mature enough and are investors committed enough to the industry that at least for quality at a price, there will always be an IPO market regardless of the ups and downs of the industry?
A few years ago, we had a headline of, the end of Windows, and then we saw the mother of all Windows. So, never say never, I guess. Absent a financial crisis where the market just completely shuts down, I think at least we've seen a big slowdown, but there are still companies getting out there. Even in the last few weeks, we've seen some companies announce their offerings. We'll see how they price. But the market isn't completely shut down. I think it's more, though, a phenomenon of capital flows, and we probably talked about this last year, and certainly in 2014. When the generalist investors come in and they're excited about biotech, and we're in that part of the cycle, there's just a lot more money there, and there is a window for more companies to jump through. Maybe that window doesn't close all the way when the funds cycle to other sectors, but it certainly is a narrower window if you want to extend the analogy to jump through. So, I don't think we'll avoid that sort of cycle where we'll, in a particular year or 2-year period, for other macro trends, we see opportunities for tens of companies to go. The question is it completely famine on the other side? And, right now it looks like, yes, there's opportunity for, good stories, good technologies at the right price to still get out there.
It was another big year for drug approvals, but more than half of those were for orphan drugs. What does that say about the industry, and does it speak at all to the pricing pressures from payers?
Well, it absolutely does, and it sort of tells you where the pipelines are aligned to. And it's not all orphan per se. I guess I think about it even in the context of precision medicine, more targeted, and I guess in some cases you end up with a population that by definition you're orphan. But it's a real manifestation of that pricing pressure to say, look, we've got to get a product to the market that is differentiated, and the best way to do that is to more precisely define a population where that is likely to respond, and that we can show in the real world, efficacy and hopefully therefore efficiency to the system. So that that message has reverberated through the decisions in terms of at least the initial indications for some of these drugs. I mean, obviously in certain, especially in oncology, there's opportunity to extend the label later, but at least for the initial approvals, that's seen as probably the most favorable strategy in terms of getting the initial product to market relatively efficiently. It is interesting, a broader picture, the sort of case study of, some of the immuno-oncology drugs that have gone broader. In particular, I'm thinking Bristol Myers here, who, decided to do trials without a biomarker and have done incredibly well. So it's not a one-size-fits-all strategy. But yes, I think generally, and especially as you look at emerging biotech companies that are, even though they've been able to refill their coffers recently because of favorable capital markets, are going to remain focused on capital efficiency. It's an important strategy. Let's get as targeted as possible. Let's get to the market as efficient as possible. Let's have the best chance of demonstrating value and getting reimbursed. And then, let's see if there's opportunities to address, more conditions on the label, when we're already there in the market.
We've seen consolidation among payers. Is that affecting the balance of power between drug makers and payers?
Yeah, and I think you've seen it as well on the provider side, and you've seen providers more integrated systems where you've got effectively payers being able to wanting to control more delivery, and it's all a consequence. All of that is a consequence of shifting balance of power around a constrained budget for total healthcare costs. So, yeah, I do think that's certainly a factor. You've seen it in the U.S. with more on the PBM side and their willingness to exert pressure on price through things like formulary exclusions. But yeah, that shakeout of amongst really all the stakeholders or across healthcare is directly related to this sustainability issue we talked about earlier. And I think we'll continue to see that. Whether it's more mergers or other ways to exert pressure and negotiations, that'll be part of this continuing trend.
Earlier this year, we spoke to your colleague Susan Garfield about the piece she co-authored with Ellen Licking and In Vivo that called for the industry to embrace new partnerships with payers and embrace such pricing strategies as models that involve risk sharing. This year's Beyond Borders touches on those themes some more. One of the things you discussed is the idea of indication-specific pricing. To what extent are payers pushing that, and how does the industry view this? And any sign it's taking hold?
There's just early signs at this point. And there's obviously a lot of complexities with that in terms of how drugs are actually prescribed and used. And so there's trepidation on that. But I think that is one of the models. If you really get down to outcomes or value-based pricing, a particular drug could have more or less value in a particular indication. So I think it's a recognition of that we're going to move from, in one form or fashion, from unit-based pricing to value-based pricing over time. And so leaving room for, different payments based on value created for a particular indication is certainly part of that. Obviously, there's regulatory impediments, best price regulations on government, Medicare pricing, Medicaid pricing, and so forth. But yeah, there's early examples of it. It's not prevalent, but it will be part of, in our view, it'll be part of the sort of the arsenal of new payment models going forward.
You've got an interesting piece in this year's report from Roger Longman of Real Endpoints, who argues that payers are not monolithic. That's to say, each operates under different economic realities, and what demonstrates value to one payer may be quite different than value to another. As companies seek to establish the value of their products, how does this complicate the challenge they face?
Yeah, well, it makes it very complicated actually, because one could think of at the same time we're advocating, and I think there's another piece in the report from Michael Sherman as the Chief Medical Officer at Harvard Pilgrim talking about the need for pharma to be more strategic and think about strategic relationships with payers. All great. Roger's point's also a very good one. The result, though, if you take it from a perspective of a biotech company, a commercial biotech company, or a pharma company, a larger company, is that you're going to really have a plethora of unique agreements because not everybody's incentives are the same, and not every, like you point out, not every payer's incentives are the same. It really depends on what part of the market they're addressing. That speaks to a biopharma company needing to do real market segmentation and say, where are we going to place our bets? Where's our where does our strategy align with our commercial strategy align with our ability to demonstrate value? Might we have different types of arrangements for different payer categories, depending on what part of the population they're addressing? All that adds complexity, and to a degree, you can think about it as the industry used to have one business model of getting a product approved and marketing it, and reimbursement was sort of a secondary issue, to now potentially having several business models around a single product.
You also talk about the move towards cures. How ready is the payer community in its push for value to pay for cures?
Yeah, that's a great question. We recently hosted a panel of several CEOs, and we were talking about annuity-based payment models, which is often brought up when very high-priced curative medicines are discussed, where the payback is may come after over years, if not decades. And we asked the question, how soon before we see a real annuity-based pricing model in the marketplace? And the first two respondents said a decade, which is always sort of that period that's far enough out that it's acknowledging that it's likely to happen, but it's far enough out there that we're saying we really don't know when. And then one other CEO said 2 years. And we said, well, okay, that's a contrary position. What's driving that? He said, well, I'm on the board of a gene therapy company. We're a couple years away. We know we're dealing with a small indication. It's going to have a very high price. There's really practically no other way to do it. We're going to have to figure this out. And so I think the headline we use in the report is the cures are coming as we see more curative medicine, either because of gene therapy or some of the gene editing technologies that are albeit early, very exciting. I think the products themselves are going to force new kinds of models that involve getting compensated over time as the value is created in the system. And again, easy to say, much harder to do because of regulatory constraints and so forth. But over time, the regulations will have to catch up to the reality that society will want these cures. We will want them for our family members, and yet we'll have to figure out how to pay for them in a way that doesn't bust budgets.
We've got biosimilars starting to become a reality, and a deceleration in revenue and earnings. Are we facing any type of a patent cliff in biotech that will be akin to anything like we saw in pharmaceuticals?
Not akin to pharmaceuticals, because as you're aware, biosimilars are different than a traditional generic. So the innovator is likely going to always be able to maintain a reasonable market position. Prices will come down, but I don't think we're going to see the sort of 90% or more decrease in the list price that you often see when there are multiple entrants in a small molecule generic situation. But yeah, so for companies that are highly dependent on an innovative biologic that now is going to face competition, they're going to see a significant decrease. They won't go down. They won't either. My belief in most cases, they will stay in the market. and they'll maintain a reasonable share of that market, but at least for that product, they'll see a fairly significant decline and need to make it up elsewhere. I do think it's particularly interesting the number of commercial leaders who have now said, not with their own products, but they're going to effectively use their manufacturing and marketing and sometimes therapeutic area expertise to enter the biosimilar market and actually play, as a competitor in that space because, the technology means there's fairly high bars to entry. The way that all plays out and who ends up net winner and loser will be interesting, but we won't see, a case where, or at least a typical case won't be where the competition drives the innovator completely out of the market.
Glen Giovannetti, EY Global Biotechnology Leader. Glen, thanks as always.
Thank you, Danny. I hope you have a good bio.
Thanks for listening. The Bio Report is a production of the Levine Media Group. To automatically download this podcast each week, subscribe to our RSS feed or through iTunes or other podcast manager. To join our mailing list, go to levinemediagroup.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to drop us a line or are interested in sponsoring this podcast, send email to danny@levinemediagroup.com. Special thanks to Jonah Levine, who composed our theme music, and the Jonah Levine Collective, which performs it.